you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Meets Incredibles. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Yellow Pikmin 88 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The two vigilantes did indeed reach the location of the fire, and though the building was coming apart at the seams, they were able to get everyone who was still trapped inside and Unkonsu out in time, though it did require Bob barrel butt through a wall. Unfortunately, upon exiting they wound up landing inside a jewelry store. The fact they were wearing balaclavas didn't help matters, and having a narrow escape with a cop which Lucius was forced to freeze. That was way too close. The ice vigilante said as the pair made it back to his car. We are not doing that again. As they drove off, they didn't notice the mysterious woman watching them from her vehicle as she spoke into a phone. Verify you want to SWCH targets? Over, the person on the other end questioned. Trust me. This is the one he's been looking for, the woman replied with a smile. Upon returning home, Bob made his way through the house as quietly as he could. But as he made his way through the lounge, he froze when a lamp turned on. The man turned around fast as he saw a chair in front of him which swiveled to show Helen sitting in it, a discontented look on her face. I thought you'd be back by 11, she said, drumming her fingers on her arm. I said I'd be back later. Bob replied matter-of-factly. I assumed you'd be back later. If you came back at all, you'd be back later, she said in air quotes. Well, I'm back. Okay, Bob said as he began to leave, only to be stopped by his wife's outstretched arm on his shoulder. As she approached him, he flinched when she picked something small and gray off his jacket. Is this rubble? She questioned him. It was just a little workout, just to stay loose. You know how I feel about that, Bob. Darn you. We can't blow cover again, Helen scolded him. The building was coming down anyway. Bob muttered. A detail he probably shouldn't have mentioned. What? You knocked down the building? Helen said aghast. It was on fire, structurally unsound. It was coming down anyway, Bob defended, though Helen was far from satisfied by excuse as she rubbed her temples. Tell me you haven't been listening to the police scanner again. Look, I performed a public service. You act like that's a bad thing. It is a bad thing, Bob. Uprooting our family again so you can relive the glory days is a very bad thing, Helen admonished as their argument escalated. Reliving the glory days is better than acting like they didn't happen. Yes, they happened. But this, our family, is what's happening now, Bob. And you are missing this? I can't believe you don't want to go to your own son's graduation. It's not a graduation. He's moving from the 4th grade to the 5th grade. Bob debated. It's a ceremony. It's psychotic. They keep creating new ways to celebrate mediocrity, but if someone is genuinely exceptional, then... This is not about you, Bob. This is about Dash. Helen reprehended, which seemed to touch a nerve with Bob as he argued back. You want to do something for Dash? Then let him actually compete. Let him go out for sports. I will not be made the enemy here. You know why we can't do that. The argument reached its boiling point as Bob shouted. Because he'd be great. This is not about you, Helen shouted back, her head stretching up to his height with every word. But their argument was silenced a small gust of wind as the couple noticed some papers on the table rustling. Right, Dash. I know you're listening. Come on out, Bob said gently as Helen called out to Violet, whom they knew was also hiding. Roman 6, you, too, young lady. Come on out. Bob beckoned their children, who crept out from behind the furniture. Violet with her head invisible. It's okay, kids. We're just having a discussion. Pretty loud discussion, Violet noted. Yeah, but that's okay. Because what's important is that Mommy and I are always a team. We're always united against, the forces of, pig-headedness, Helen suggested smugly. I was gonna say evil or something. Yeah, well, let's leave that up, Uncle Toshi, shall we? Helen said before turning to the kids. We're sorry we woke you. Everything's okay. Go back to bed. It's late. Good night, Mom. Night, Dad. Dash said as he and his sister returned to their rooms, his sister also bidding their parents good night. In fact, we should all be in bed, Helen remarked as they went to join their children, finally retiring for the night. Back in Japan, however, sleep was the last thing on anyone's mind as Izuku and his friends were currently together outside a small tea house at Bagano Park, having completed their tasks. They were also being accompanied by a small 6-year-old girl with long white hair and a little horn on the right side of her forehead. This was Eri. The little girl was currently sitting on one of the swings in the play area with Izuku standing behind as he gently pushed her. Higher, Deku. Higher. Izuku felt his heart melt as she laughed. Ever since the school festival, Eri had come more out of her shell as of late. She wasn't as shy around the rest of his classmates or afraid to go out more often provided she had one of them with her. It really is great to see her so happy after all she's been through. Ochako smiled. Yes, indeed. There's truly nothing more precious than a child's laughter. Agreed, Ida. You know, Eri hasn't really had any time around kids her age. Maybe we can talk to Mr. Aizawa about setting up a playdate. Tsu pondered. Oh yeah, don't you have a little sister about as old as her? Kirishima asked. Satsuki. Yes, she's 6 too. Tsu confirmed. Well, as long as Mr. Aizawa thinks she's ready, I'm all for it, Ochako said as she glanced back at Eri, who was now off the swing and grinning up at Izuku as he petted her head. But I'm sure he'll have no doubts. While the small group continued to enjoy their day out, however, a skinny man with sandy blonde hair was walking down the street across from the park, his hands in his pockets as another man was following behind him. He looked from side to side before the two of them made their way into an alley which led to an old warehouse as they let themselves in to find a group of individuals waiting for them. Upon shutting the door, the blonde man sighed heavily, bringing a hand to his head. Man, that was too close back there. Nobody saw us, he shouted, his tone changing halfway through his sentence while pulling out a gray and black mask, which he began to pull over his head, revealing himself to be none other than the bipolar villain, Twice. Meanwhile, the second man sauntered over to a folded pile of clothes consisting of a large yellow overcoat, black balaclava, ornate white mask, and a feather-tipped top hat. This man was the villain Mr. Compress, and as he and Twice finished donning their costumes, they approached the other figures in the room. I trust that we didn't keep you waiting long? Mr. Compress inquired to the one sitting at the front of the group. A man with scraggly pale bluish-gray hair and dry skin, with multiple hands covering his arms and head. The leader of the League of Villains, Tamura Shigaraki. No, he replied with a husky voice. Did you find anything? Mr. Compress smiled behind his mask as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a turquoise marble. I think you'll be pleased to know there's an interesting story to this one. We almost died capturing him. It was a piece of cake. Twice contradicted himself as Mr. Compress flicked the marble onto the ground, causing it to transform into a man in a flash of light. He had short black hair and was dressed in a suit and breathed profoundly as he looked around the area frantically. Where am I? What did you to me? He asked in a panic. Calm yourself. I just wanted to make sure you made it here unharmed, Mr. Compress replied. Don't worry, pal. Now that we're here you can tell our boss what you know. Twice added before his voice turned fierce. If you don't talk, I'll kill you. No, we won't. We need him alive. That's enough, Twice. Shigaraki raised his hand before addressing the man. Let's start from the top, shall we? What's your name? Illusion, he reluctantly replied. That's your hero name? A girl with blonde hair in 2 buns asked, also known as Himiko Toga. I hate heroes, Illusion suddenly shouted before his rage instantly dropped and he shrunk back. Sorry. Oh no, no need for apologies. That's actually something we have in common, you see. Shigaraki reassured. We are the League of Villains. Why have you brought me here? Illusion asked. You see, my comrades have been watching you for some time now. You've visited several hero agencies around the country trying to hire pros for something. But so far only one hero took up your offer, the stone hero Mortar, who happens to have gone missing. Why is that? Well, Illusion began to sweat. We have a pretty strong feeling it isn't jobs you're offering heroes, suspected Dabai, a black-haired villain with multiple burns on his face and arms. We want to know who you work for. When it comes to villains, we're the top dogs, and if any upcoming punk thinks they can take our rank, they've got another thing coming. Just ask Overhaul, Spinner, the gecko villain, stated. Who's Overhaul? Illusion asked, confused. Exactly. Let's not go cutting them down just yet, Spinner. Kurogiri, a villain composed mainly of purple and black mist in a suit, cautioned. Right now, all we want is to meet your boss. So would you kindly tell us who they are? Illusion thought carefully for a moment before he spoke. My leader has no interest in your turf or rank. He just needed heroes for the project he's been developing. But why? Shigaraki asked. He needed guinea pigs. The villains noticeably reacted to that detail. Ooh, now I'm curious. Toga giggled. Then you have no reason to deny our request, Shigaraki added. Take us to your leader. We might be able to offer some assistance on this project, especially if it involves killing heroes. Only fake ones, Spinner added. Illusion seemed to be a lot calmer now after everything he'd heard as he held his chin in consideration. Finally, he gave his answer. I'll call for a jet. But only 2 of you can come with me, you being one of them. He pointed to Shigaraki. Then Kurogiri shall accompany me. The villainous leader agreed to the terms, an excited grin peeking behind his mask. I can hardly wait. And only more trouble was brewing in America as Bob's trouble only seemed to be growing. After going into work the next morning, the retired hero was called into his boss, Mr. Huff's office, to discuss his past transactions. Now, when it normally came to these talks, Bob would just grin and bear it since the discussion was often always the same. He'd help clients gain insurance with loopholes instead of charging them more or rejecting them entirely, which would grind Huff's gears considerably because they weren't their people. It disgusted Bob to no end that his employer was keener on helping the upper crusts than assist the downtrodden and then criticize him for not doing the same. But the final straw came during the meeting when Bob spotted a man getting mugged from the window, and yet despite also witnessing the crime, Huff refused to let Bob go to stop the mugger under threat of firing him. He even had the gall to say it was a good thing the mugger got away, which is what finally caused Bob to snap as he seized his boss by the throat and sent him flying through 4 walls. It went without saying that that little act of rebellion spelt the end of his career, as Rick had to be called in to clean up the mess. The man himself was now wrapping up the situation at the hospital as he left the ward to find Bob waiting outside. He threw the super a disappointed scowl before walking away with Bob following after. How is he? He asked worriedly. He'll live. Rick replied dryly as they continued their conversation down the hallway towards an elevator. As they walked, they passed by a notice board with several articles pinned on it. Some of the headlines included: Shy Hasakai inoculated. Into thin air, missing people still not found. Deaver luck next time, super rights activists petition rejected. And who is screenslaver? Masked tech thief strikes again. I'm fired, aren't I? Oh, you think? What can I say, Rick? Nothing you haven't said before. Someone was in trouble. Someone's always in trouble. I had to do something. Yeah, every time you say those words, it means a month and a half of trouble for me, Bob. It means hundreds of thousands of taxpayers' dollars. Rick groaned, pressing the elevator's button as he began to count the ways. We gotta pay to keep the company quiet. We gotta pay damages, erase memories, relocate your family. Every time it gets harder. Money, 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 money. We can't keep doing this, Bob. Yeah, I'm at my wit's end myself, Rick. Not just here, mind you. Having trouble at home? Rick queried. A little. I know Helen's gonna kill me when she finds out, and the kids are struggling themselves with keeping their quirks under control. Them having met Toshi before doesn't exactly make it easier. Bob vented as Rick sighed understandingly. I'll tell you this much, Bob. I would give anything for this country to have their own symbol of peace back. But it's not my decision to make. We appreciate what you did in the old days, but those days are over. From now on, you're on your own, he said as he stepped into the elevator, though he stopped the door as it was closing. Listen, Bob, maybe I could relocate you. You know, for old time's sake. No, I can't do that to my family. Everyone just got settled. I'll make it work. Thanks. Okay, take care of yourself. As the door slid shut, Bob made his way back to his car, the heavy traffic giving him plenty time to stew in his regrets, trying and failing to think of ways to break the bad news to his family. After returning home, he headed straight to his study, his passing excuse to his wife being rough day locking the door behind himself. He first opened his lockbox and counted the money inside it. Nowhere near enough. He growled as he threw the box onto the floor in frustration, scattering dollars everywhere. The frustrated man mentally kicked himself as he hurriedly picked the contents back up and tossing the refilled box back into his desk drawer, too angry at himself to realize he'd forgotten to lock it before turning to his briefcase. He began to dispose of the papers inside, starting with a giant work manual which he tore in half as though it were one sheet and then dumping the rest in the bin. But he suddenly stopped when he heard one of the items sounded noticeably heavier than the rest. Reaching into the bin, he pulled out a thick brown envelope which contained a sleek silver tablet. "What the hell?" he murmured as he looked the device over before it suddenly began to beep, causing him to stare at its screen as a small message came into view. "Hold still," he read before the tablet flashed a facial recognition scan at him. "Match, Mr. Incredible." Bob dropped the tablet in shock as it landed on the floor before a probe emerged from it and scanned a blue light around its surroundings. "Room is secure. Commence message." Bob stared at the mysterious device as the image of a woman with silver hair and tan skin appeared on the screen. "Hello, Mr. Incredible. Yes, we know who you are. Rest assured, your secret is safe with us. My name is Mirage." She spoke in a silky voice as Bob picked up the tablet, listening intently. "We have something in common. According to the government, neither of us exist. Please pay attention, as this message is classified and will not be repeated." As the woman continued to speak, Bob quickly rushed to his desk and fumbled for something to write with as he began to take notes on the message. "I represent a top-secret division of the government, designing and testing experimental technology, and we have need of your unique abilities. Something has happened at our testing facility. A highly experimental attack robot." "Honey," the message was suddenly interrupted by Helen. "Huh? What?" "Dinner's ready." "Okay," Bob replied offhandedly as he continued to listen to the message. "Has escaped control. Although it is contained within an isolated area, it threatens to cause incalculable damage to itself and to our facilities, jeopardizing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment in research. Because of its highly sensitive nature, this mission would have not existed." "Is someone in there?" Helen interjected again. "It's the TV, trying to watch. Something about a villain in Japan." Bob fibbed on the spot. "Well, stop watching. It's time for dinner." "1 minute," Bob yelled back as Mirage began to wrap up her offer. "If you accept, your payment will be triple your current annual salary. Call the number on the card. Voice matching will be used to ensure security. The supers aren't gone, Mr. Incredible. You're still here. You can still do great things. Or you can listen to police scanners. Your choice. You have 24 hours to respond. Think about it." With that, the screen went blank. Bob sat down, his mind racing. He began to look at the walls of his study, adorned with articles, thank you messages and awards. Any and every item that represented his past heroics, ending on his old super suit standing proudly in its glass case. His gaze turned to his desk drawer as he realized the level of benefits Mirage's proposition could bring. The pay she was offering. It could finally be what he needed to achieve his dream as he looked at the photo of All Might and his kids. A small card suddenly popped out of the tablet displaying the aforementioned number before the device then spoke. "This message will self-destruct." Uh-oh. The tablet then detonated in a small explosion filling the room with smoke. Bob stumbled out, coughing the fumes out of his lungs before the smoke activated the house's fire alarms, causing sprinklers to spray water everywhere. The next few hours were spent drying up the house since almost everything was soaked from the sprinklers. As Bob was focused on drying a row of books with a hairdryer, Helen approached him from behind. "You are one distracted guy." She smirked, breaking Bob out of the stupor he was in. Am I? I don't mean to be," he mumbled. I know you miss being a hero and your job is ... frustrating. I just want you to know how much it means to me that you stay at it anyway. You know you'll always be our hero." Helen thanked him with a hug and an embrace. "Thanks." Bob smiled before he frowned. Honey? About the job?" "What?" "Something's happened," he said nervously, trying to think of what to tell his wife. "What?" she asked, her voice growing concerned. "Not good." Bob thought frantically. What could he say? "Hey, I lost my temper and got fired, but I've been offered some freelance hero work and they're paying me triple." "It's good, it's all good." Not likely. If their talk last night was any indication, he was on thin ice regarding hero work in any way, shape, or form. "What's going on, Bob?" Helen asked again insistently as Bob gave his answer. "The company is sending me to a conference." "A conference?" Helen repeated curiously. "Oh, out of town. And I'm just going to be gone for a few days." It was a white lie to be sure, but considering the fruits the offer could bear, it seemed merited to Bob at the moment. "They've never sent you to a conference before. This is good, isn't it?" she said hopefully. "Yes," Bob replied hesitantly. "You see, they're finally recognizing your talents. You're moving up," Helen said happily. "Yes." "Honey, this is wonderful." "Yes, it is." Later on, Bob returned to his study to call the number as he heard Mirage answer him from the other end. "Hello? This is Mr. Incredible. I'm in." Meanwhile, at an undisclosed airport, a sleek black aircraft shaped somewhat like a manta ray was parked and ready for boarding as a car pulled up to it. The doors opened as Illusion stepped out accompanied by Shigaraki and Kurogiri, the two villains following him onto the craft. "I assume your boss knows we're coming?" Shigaraki inquired from his seat, swirling a glass of liquor in his hand, his pinky raised. Naturally. He was surprised, to say the least. "But he's curious to meet you, so be grateful. He's dedicating his time to you and your gang." "Oh, we will be," Kurogiri insisted. "I'm curious about something myself though. Back when we met, you got rather angry when Toga mistook your name for a hero title." Illusion shifted uncomfortably at the mention. "What of it?" he muttered. "Why is it that you hate heroes?" "That's none of your business," Illusion snapped. "You have your reasons, I have mine, let's leave it at that. Just sit quietly and wait until we land." "As you wish," Kurogiri said coolly. "Not one for conversation, HM. No matter. Him ignoring us makes my job easier," he thought, receiving a knowing glance from Shigaraki. Concurrently, however, on another aircraft, Mr. Incredible, since he was on the job, was getting the rundown on his mission from Mirage as the two were sitting opposite each other, a holographic display of his target in between them. A large spherical robot with 5 bisymmetrical, segmented legs with 4-fingered grappling claws and a small eye-shaped protrusion sticking from the top of its body specified as a sensor cluster. The Omnidroid 8000 is a top-secret prototype battle robot. Its artificial intelligence enables it to solve any problem it's confronted with. And, unfortunately, let me guess, it got smart enough to wonder why it had to take orders. Mr. Incredible speculated, to which Mirage confirmed. "We lost control, and now it's loose in the jungle, threatening our facility. We've had to evacuate all personnel from the island for their own safety." "How am I going in?" Mr. Incredible asked as the display changed to a side view of the island with the jet hovering above. "The Omnidroid's defenses necessitate an airdrop from 5,000 feet, Mirage explained as the display showed a small shuttle leaving the jet down toward the island. "Its cloaking devices make it difficult to track, although we're pretty sure it's on the southern half of the island," she added with the display changing to a bird's-eye view with a highlighted region. "One more thing. Obviously, it represents a significant investment. You want me to shut it down without completely destroying it?" Mr. Incredible discerned, making Mirage chuckle. "You are Mr. Incredible." With the report concluded, the hero prepared to disembark as he buckled into a reclining seat, positioned in front of the shuttle's opening. A soldier gave him a thumbs up before pressing a button which caused the seat to slide towards the opening, though due to his, shall we say, ample frame, Mr. Incredible found himself unable to fit through the hole. Though a quick increase in the seat's power by the soldier was enough to force him in as the door closed. "I must warn you, it's a learning robot. Every moment you spend fighting it only increases its knowledge of how to beat you," cautioned him as he prepared for launch. "Shut it down. Do it quickly. Don't destroy it. And don't die." "Great. Thanks." With that, the shuttle was ejected from the craft as it rocketed down towards the island before SWCH to a propeller, allowing it to glide to the assigned region. Upon landing, Mr. Incredible found it just as strong to get out of the shuttle as it had been getting in. So he resorted to breaking it apart from the inside as he stepped out and stretched his overweight body before uttering his catchphrase. "Showtime," he declared before setting off into the dense jungle in search of his target. He explored the area for what felt like hours before he spotted a large slash marks on a nearby tree and not too far from it an X-shaped footprint. Not long after he saw the signs, though, a pair of black metal claws pushed down the trees behind the hero, revealing the Omnidroid, which stood nearly 4 times his height, its sensor cluster displaying a light blue visor which glowed with killing intent. The droid lunged its tentacles at Mr. Incredible, trying to impale him with its closed claws. The man was able to dodge the first 2 strikes, though the third managed to scratch his arm, tearing through his costume. Mr. Incredible leapt over the Omnidroid, landing behind it as a second sensor cluster appeared from the bottom of its body, turning to face the hero as he delivered a strong punch, sending the robot flying back and crashing to the ground. "Oh yeah," Mr. Incredible grinned, his old fire burning again. But his victory was short-lived as the Omnidroid, despite being upside down, simply SWCH its primary sensor and easily stood up, undamaged. The battle had just begun. Uh-oh. The robot began to charge towards the American hero as he tried to jump over it again. But unfortunately for him, the Omnidroid was prepared as it calculated his leap arc with its sensor, allowing it to swat him in midair and send him flying into a tree. The weight of his body caused the mighty timber to snap and toppled towards the robot, which quickly retracted its tentacles and sensors, turning into a giant sphere. It then began to use its second form to try and crush Mr. Incredible under it, as he began to run from the robot boulder, like some sort of cliched adventurer, before he jumped off a cliff and slid down the side of the mountain, the Omnidroid right behind him. He rolled to the side onto an outcrop as the robot rolled past him and landed on its legs before it was struck in the back by a boulder thrown by Mr. Incredible, though it did nothing to faze it as the Omnidroid decided to return the favor. Hurling boulders at the hero, it managed to strike him with the third one and followed up with a tentacle strike. Though Mr. Incredible narrowly dodged the impaling claw, which lodged itself in the cliff before pulling out as the robot chased him down. Leaping into the air, intent on crushing the man, Mr. Incredible dove forward and found himself in a lava field, the Omnidroid now standing behind him with his back to a lake of the molten rock. Opening 2 of its claws, the robot moved its tentacles forward, forcing Mr. Incredible to take the brunt of the attack as the Omnidroid tried to push him back into the lava. The American hero felt his feet scraping against the ground as the robot was slowly but surely inching him closer and closer to the edge. "Come on, Bob. You may be rusty, but you're not out of commission. Go beyond. Plus ultra," with a roar of strength and maximum effort. Mr. Incredible was able to pull the Omnidroid into the lava as it sank below the surface. Laughing at his supposed victory, the hero yelped when he felt a crack in his spine as he was turning to leave. "Ah, oh, my back," he groaned before suddenly the Omnidroid burst up through the ground, its body heated and dripping with lava. The resulting burrowing caused the ground around Mr. Incredible to start cracking as the robot began to spin its burning claws towards him like a pair of red-hot turbines. The advancing attack forced him to leap onto one of the floating rocks, but with his bad back, he couldn't get away as the robot seized him by his legs and slammed him against the ground before it began to pull him apart like a rack. But before it could tear him in half, the hero felt his spine crack back into place. "Oh, ha. With his strength renewed, Mr. Incredible tore off one of the claws to escape. The Omnidroid began to search for him, unaware that he was directly beneath its lower sensor cluster. Before it could spot him, he ripped off the cluster and climbed up inside the robot, which began to stab its body from all sides to try and kill him. It missed every time while the hero simply laid back inside its torso and waited until it came to a standstill, having weakened itself before he punched off its upper sensor and whistled. The robot quickly tried to grab him from the inside, but instead pulled out its own core, causing it to shut down completely and collapse as Mr. Incredible casually walked away triumphant. As he left, though, he didn't realize he was being watched by a macaw, which was actually a spy camera linked to a monitor being watched by Mirage and another figure who spoke. Surprising. We must bring him back, sound the all clear, and invite him to dinner. Later that night, Mr. Incredible arrived at the island's base via a pod, dressed in a suit but still wearing his mask, as he walked towards a door which led into a large dining room, the left wall a glowing magma flow. As the hero was about to make his way in, the lava wall began to slit open, causing him to hide behind the door. He peeked out to see Mirage emerging from the opening, a shadowed figure just behind her. He couldn't make out who the person was, but they spoke to Mirage for a few moments before retreating back into the magma flow. Thinking quickly, Mr. Incredible hurried back to the pod as Mirage opened the door, making it seem as though he'd just arrived. "Am I overdressed?" he asked casually. "Actually, you look rather dashing," she replied. But unbeknownst to the hero, as the two sat down to dinner, the mysterious figure was making his way down a corridor leading to a meeting room. The lights revealed the man to be in his mid to late 20s with flaming red hair, an apt comparison in color as it was also styled in a widow's peak, rather like a flame. He was dressed in a black and white costume, his gloves and boots being white and his torso black, displaying a large white S and a black cape flapping behind him. Upon entering the room, he smiled and spoke with a cheery voice. "Welcome back, Illusion. I see you brought some friends back from Japan. So which one of you is Mr. Shigaraki?" he queried as sitting before him were Illusion, Shigaraki, and Kurogiri. "That would be me," Shigaraki said, standing up. "And what is your name?" "I am Syndrome," the man replied flamboyantly. "And may I say I'm quite surprised to have gotten your attention. I mean, I've had dealings with crime families and terrorist organizations, but supervillains? This is a first." "Well, then all the more reason to get down to business," Shigaraki said, lacing his fingers. "See, there's a bit of a problem we need to address first." "Very well. Illusion, would you please escort Mr. Shigaraki's associate to the lounge? I'd like to continue this meeting privately," Syndrome ordered. "Yes, sir." Illusion nodded as he left, with Kurogiri tentatively following, who looked back at Shigaraki. "It's fine, Kurogiri, this won't take very long." "Understood, Tamura Shigaraki." The warp villain obeyed as the two villains were left alone. "Now then, what seems to be the problem?" Syndrome asked as he casually sat down. Shigaraki remained standing. "Here's the deal, Syndrome. I don't know what it is you're up to on this island, but you need to understand that Japan belongs to the League of Villains, and I don't like others trespassing on my turf." "Oh, I assure you, Mr. Shigaraki, I have no intention of taking over your territory. My target has always been the USA." Syndrome insisted as he brought up a display of the Omnidroid, though its design seemed a lot different than the one Mr. Incredible had fought. "As you can see here, my creation has gone through many phases of development as it's battled and executed heroes throughout the years. Almost all of them are American since the criminalization made them easy to lure into my trap. The project is nearing fruition with Mr. Incredible here being the final test subject." Shigaraki was quite surprised as he studied the various stages of development the Omnidroid had gone through, most particularly at the list of heroes it had gone up against. He counted at least 30 names before he turned his attention back to Syndrome, the villain now more intrigued by the man than unfriendly. "But once you're done with America, I imagine you'll want to set up shop in Japan too, since your underling has been scouting the area for your guinea pigs. You are a businessman after all, and businesses expand. So here's what I'm proposing. Instead of getting into some pointless feud down the line over territory or resources, simply merge your organization with mine." "You want me to come and work for you?" Syndrome raised an eyebrow as Shigaraki removed his mask to give him a smile, somewhat disturbing the man with his dry face. "I wouldn't phrase it that way," he replied. "We have similar goals after all, to destroy heroes and this whole ridiculous society. You've killed many after all." Syndrome chuckled. "Technically my robots killed those heroes. Then again, I did create them, so I guess you're correct. But I'm not just killing heroes. My goals and motives are far more grandiose than that." Shigaraki scoffed irritably as he scratched his neck, redonning his mask. TCH, just like the hero killer. Thinks he's so high and mighty. Nothing a little intimidation won't fix. Just answer the question, will you join the League of Villains or not? If you insist on opposing, I can always just kill Y. Zap. The villain suddenly found himself immobilized by a neon cyan beam that was coming from Syndrome's fingertip. The man himself smirked at him as he raised his other hand holding up 3 fingers. Tell you what, I like your style from what Illusion has told me about you and your team. And honestly, I've been thinking about the possibility of offering my services to supervillains for a while now. Syndrome said as he stood up. So, I'll give you 3 guesses to answer a question of my own. Guess right and I'll team up with you. Guess wrong and you'll be my next test subject. I'll only work for someone who understands me, so here's my question. What is my quirk? He smiled as he released Shigaraki, who shuddered as he regained control of his body. Just what sort of game was this villain playing with him? Is this some kind of joke? It's clearly those beams you just shot me with. Wrong answer. Just another of my inventions. Syndrome removed one of his gloves and pointed his naked finger at Shigaraki with no effect. 2 guesses left. The villain snarled as he thought. The man was clearly testing him, so that meant he was interested in joining him. He just needed to think carefully. Don't lose your temper. Your quirk allows you to produce and control machinery. Nope, wrong again. My robots think for themselves. As for the design, that's all sheer brainpower. Syndrome grinned, tapping his head. Last chance, Tilda, he taunted, turning his back. Shigaraki began scratching himself again, growing more frustrated. What was he missing? This villain had weapons on par with many quirks and was a technological genius. And then there was his motive. He said his goal was more than killing heroes, but what goal could be greater for a villain? And why rely on robots and gadgets to do it whilst he sat back in the shadows? Only someone who... Shigaraki's eyes widened as he finally started to connect the dots and began to laugh amusingly. He'd figured it out. I get it. It all makes sense. Your inventions, the body count, your methods. It was a trick question. You want to prove them wrong. All of them. Prove that it's not impossible. Syndrome grinned ecstatically as he turned to face Shigaraki and spread out his arms, his cape billowing. Yes, that's right, Mr. Shigaraki. I, Syndrome, am quirkless. Nobody believed in me, so I'll show them. I'll show all of them just how wrong they were. I'll create a world where anyone can be whoever they want to be. But if I'm gonna do that, I first have to destroy the status quo. Yes, and together we can make it happen. Shigaraki agreed as he approached and extended his hand. Welcome to the League of Villains, Syndrome. Let's call it a mutual partnership for now. I am a businessman after all, and I look forward to working with you. The red-haired villain smiled, reaching out to shake his new partner's hand only to pull it back at the last second. Whoa ho ho, you almost got me there. Nice try, but Illusion told me about your quirk. I'm not giving up these babies that easily. He chuckled. Diamen, those gloves are so annoying. Shigaraki grumbled, but soon found himself laughing along with Syndrome. This looked like the beginning of a deadly alliance. Over at Uenezu was busily looking over the files and articles on the missing heroes. The police had made no developments in the whereabouts of Mortar, and the missing supers from America were hardly being investigated at all. No doubt in part to the government's proclamation. The Mouse Principal shook his head as he looked at other world news events from the States which showed crime was showing to be reaching concerning levels. Matters involved kidnappings, robberies, murders, and even the rare cases of villainy. This screenslaver character appeared in several papers. You would think the banning of heroes and quirk use would result in a rise of villains' activity. Nezu thought before noticing an article on a villain being shot dead by police. Then again, America's gun laws are a lot less restrictive than Japan's. This can't go on. The people deserve the choice to use their quirks within reason and for good causes. Not suppress them like a disease. All those seasoned and young lives wishing to use their powers to help others, but not being able to, just breaks my heart. I only wish there was something I could do to help them. But as he continued to browse the various papers, he stopped at one he'd sourced from America, displaying an article which discussed a hero rights activist. The page showed the image of a brown-haired man in a suit, by name of Winston Deaver. The man was one of the dual owners of DevTech, a telecommunications company that produced many screen-based devices worldwide. Winston himself, however, was also a verbal supporter of supers, and his recent petition for the government to overturn the program had been rejected. Nezu rubbed his furry chin. It seemed that Mr. Deaver had a rather large presence in his country, and though thousands of people stood behind his cause, it lacked an important factor. Example. Nezu picked up his phone and put in a call. DevTech reception, how may I help you? A voice said. Hello, I would like to speak to Mr. Deaver about a proposition I think he might like. The mouse waited for about a minute before another voice spoke to him. This is Winston Deaver. Who's calling? Mr. Deaver. You probably don't know me, but my name is Nezu and I'm the principal of VERYYYY Academy. VERYYYY? The #1 hero high school in Japan? Winston asked in astonishment. Ah, so you've heard of us. Excellent. Well, Mr. Nezu, to what do I owe this pleasure? You see, Mr. Deaver, I happened to come across the article about your petition to legalize heroes and quirks use in America. Oh, you saw that, huh? Winston grumbled. Not one of my proudest moments, I should say, considering the outcome. Oh no, Mr. Deaver, on the contrary, you should be most proud of your attempt because had you not done so, I wouldn't be speaking to you right now. Nezu countered. As the proprietor of this school, it is my duty as a hero to encourage and guide these young individuals so that they may use their quirks for the good of the country and by extension the world. You're preaching to the choir there, Mr. Nezu. Winston agreed. I may not have been lucky enough to be born with a quirk, but you heroes have always inspired me aim high and work strong to what I set my mind to. That's how my sister and I raised our father's company to new heights. Go beyond, plus ultra, that's our motto. Nezu smiled. Here's the situation, Mr. Deaver. This ridiculous law against your country's heroes has frustrated me to no end as I thought there was nothing I could do to help. But upon reading about you, I believe I've thought of a way to assist your cause and give all the children of America the choice to use their quirks to shape their destinies. Well, you've certainly got my attention. What did you have in mind? Winston asked, his voice growing with excitement. While your petition was a valiant attempt, it lacked an important element. And that element would be? Example, Mr. Deaver. Example. Yes. If you want your government to repeal the law and reinstate heroes, then you need examples to convince them to do so. Luckily for you, I have plenty of fine upcoming heroes right here in my school. My first years in particular have been growing and developing their quirks and identities as heroes very well. What better way to show the government the importance of heroes and the opportunities it presents than with a group of up-and-coming youngsters? I get it. And by using heroes from another country, I can show the top brass that hero work can be done without being detrimental to the country. It's brilliant. I only wish I could find some representatives of my own. I can think of several American heroes who'd make a good argument for the movement, if I could only find them. I know the government will probably counter with your heroes not being comparable to the uses. That is true, though I'm sure we can find a way to work around that factor. See if there are any people you know who might have connections that could assist you, and I, in turn, shall do my part to help as well. I'll send you a list of the students for you to look over, and you can update me on any further developments. I can't even begin to thank you for this, Mr. Nezu. I honestly didn't think an opportunity such as this would happen. Winston cheered. This just may be the start of restoring America's place in the United Nations of Heroes. I believe so too, Mr. Deaver. Know that I do this for both the heroes of your country and those yet to come. Good day. Nezu smiled before hanging up and sighing contentedly. After the successful completion of his mission, Bob returned home to his family with a spring in his step and a brimming bank account. Mirage hadn't been exaggerating about his payment. If he kept it up with these new missions, he'd reach his goal in no time. But first, he needed to get back into shape. Though he did beat the Omnidroid, his cardio and back injury were clear signs that he wasn't up to standard. So for the next few weeks, whenever he went to work, he actually went to a local railway yard to lose weight by either towing, lifting, or even juggling train cars. It was a grueling workout and several times he was nearly spotted, but it paid off as he was soon back to a level waistline for a man his age, that is. But that's not all. His new pay allowed him to provide more for his family, starting with replacing his old crummy car with a new black one somewhat reminiscent of his old super vehicle. He even had enough to buy a new car for Helen, which greatly surprised her. And on top of it all, now that he was no longer being mentally drained by the toll of his old job, he was able to dedicate more time to his family, helping around the house, spending time with his kids, and of course loving his wife. But then one morning, as he was looking over his suit, he found a gaping hole in one of the arms, left over from his battle with the Omnidroid. He could hardly undertake any future assignments with a torn costume, but who could help him with such an issue? Bob thought for a moment until a certain name came to mind. "Hurry, honey, you'll be late for work," he heard Helen calling him before he hastily packed up his costume. He only hoped the person he was thinking of would be able and/or willing to help him. After embrace his wife goodbye, he drove for an hour or two before reaching an abstract mansion on a hill, guarded by a laser wall gate. As he pulled up to it, he pressed an intercom which turned on to display a guard. "You have an appointment?" he asked, to which Bob replied, "I'm an old friend. I just wanted to." "All visitors are required to make a resir." "Hey, get back to work. Go check the electric fence or something." Before the man could finish his sentence, a short woman with black hair and large glasses suddenly ran into the frame to usher him out in a fuss. This energetic woman was Edna Mode, world-renowned fashionista and formerly American exclusive hero costume designer. "What is it? Who are you? What do you want?" She approached the camera with only the top half of her face showing as Bob lowered his sunglasses to identify himself. "My God, you've gotten fat. Come in, come," she said, opening the gate to him. After letting him in, Bob walked alongside the short designer as the two conversed. "Yes, things are going quite well. Quite well. My God, no complaints. But, it is not the same. Not the same at all," Edna muttered. "Nowhere near as many orders as I used to get. Had to start taking non-hero projects to make ends meet." "She's a millionaire. What ends need to be met?" Bob thought in disbelief. "Weren't you just in the news? Some show in Prague? Milan, darling. Milan," Edna corrected as they entered one of the main branches of the mansion, which looked more like the foyer of a gallery row museum than a homeroom. "Supermodels? Ha, nothing super about them," Edna scoffed with disgust. "Spoiled, stupid, little stick figures with poofy lips who think only about themselves. Faye, I used to design for gods." The fashionista stared grandly up at a large golden statue fountain before sighing. "But it seems my legacy has faded along with the gods themselves. Yes, I rarely fly overseas for a collaboration, and any orders I receive exclusively from heroes are usually checkovers. It's all they're allowed to ask of me with this DMN law in place. TCH, if I had my way, I'd craft suits that would shake the world." She longed as a few strands of glowing thread emerged from her fingertips before restricting. "But perhaps you come with a challenge, eh? I was surprised to get your call," she said with growing excitement. I just need a patch job," Bob said, handing Edna his old suit as she inspected it. This is megamesh. Outmoded, but very sturdy, and you've torn right through it. What have you been doing, Robert? Moonlighting hero work?" she asked suspiciously as Bob answered awkwardly. "Must have happened a long time ago." Edna didn't appear to believe it though. "I see. This is a hobo suit, darling. Oh, you can't be seen in this. I won't allow it. 15 years ago, maybe, but now?" she said, discarding the old suit in a nearby bin. "What do you mean? You designed it?" Bob questioned as Edna waved her hand, sitting herself in a chair. "I never look back, darling. It distracts from the now. You need a new suit. That much is certain." "A new suit? Where the heck am I gonna get a new suit?" "You can't. It's impossible. I'm far too busy. So ask me now, before I again become sane," she said rapidly, turning away in false refusal. Bob could hardly believe his ears. Was she seriously offering to go over the government's head? "Wait, you want to make me a suit?" he asked to confirm, to which Edna replied with a grin. "But the law." "You push too strong, darling, but I accept. Orders are one thing, requests are another." She pulled out a sketch pad and pen as her creative mind went to work instantly. "It will be bold, dramatic." "Yeah," Bob smiled. "Heroic." "Yeah, something classic, like a How About Toshi? Oh, he had a great look. Oh, the cape and the boots." No capes, Edna snapped, tossing a paper ball to his head. Isn't that my decision? Do you remember Thunderhead? Edna peered over her sketch pad. Tall, storm powers, nice man, good with kids. Listen, Bob tried to say before Edna interrupted. November 15th of 58. All was well, another day saved when his cape snagged on a missile fin. Thunderhead was not the brightest bolt. Elastigirl, April 23rd, 57. She caught in a jet turbine. Edna gave another fatal wardrobe malfunction. You can't generalize about these things. Metaman, express elevator, Dynaguy, snagged on takeoff, splashdown, SCK into a vortex, no capes? Who do you think stopped Toshinori from wearing capes? Himself? Of course not. You and I both known how reckless he was, so someone had to get the message through his thick skull. Now, go on. Your new suit will be finished before your next assignment, she stated as she began to ascend a flight of glass steps, presumably to her studio. You know I'm retired from hero work. So you say, Robert, yet here you are. I only need a patch job. For sentimental reasons. Edna sighed begrudgingly as it seemed Bob wasn't going to drop the charade in front of her. Fine, I will also fix the hobo suit, she said, taking the costume from Bob's outstretched hand. You're the best of the best, he called after her as she continued up the stairs. Yes, I know, darling, I know. Meanwhile, back in Japan, a week had passed since Nezu had spoken to Winston Deaver on supporting his passion project, and it was at this time that the mouse hero received an update from the business tycoon. The message informed Nezu that Winston had shared the information with his mentor, Rick Dicker, and the government agent agreed with him on Nezu's advice. Below the message was a video call link and the request to contact him again as soon as possible. Currently, the principal was sitting at his desk about to make the call. Additionally, since the matter involved his students, Aizawa had also been asked to attend the meeting, the man himself standing beside Nezu as the mouse clicked the link. A call window opened up as the phone icon on screen began to ring until eventually the image of Winston Deaver appeared on the monitor. Principal Nezu, great to be speaking with you again. The man smiled. Likewise, Mr. Deaver. I would like to introduce you to Shota Aizawa, the homeroom teacher of Class 1A. Eraserhead. Winston identified the stone-faced hero with an ecstatic grin. You have quite the reputation from what I've researched on Japan's supers. Then you know how seriously I take matters concerning hero work, especially when it involves my students. Aizawa answered dryly. His tone did put Winston off somewhat, but the man kept his cool as he explained the situation. Here's the deal, gentlemen. If we're going to convince the government to re-establish supers in both work and education, we need representatives for both parties. Thanks to you, Nezu, we have the perfect candidates in Mr. Aizawa's class. And the pro-heroes? Aizawa asked expectantly. That's still a work in progress with the relocation program keeping their identities secret, but don't worry. Once Dicker picks his way through all that red tape, he should be able to get me clearance to approach some of America's top supers. But for now, we're going to start with the kids. That'll help ease the brass fears on training children to be heroes before we work our way up to the adults. So how are my students supposed to help your cause? Aizawa inquired. Here's what I'm thinking. We send your class to a small town in one of the states and have them set up their own mini-agency. They can aid the citizens with any problems they'd be allowed to help with. Lost children, snatched bags, cats in trees, etc., etc. Friendly neighborhood heroes, Nezu quipped. Bingo! The kids can show the people how good-natured, helpful, and caring heroes can be. And because they're students, them doing a good job will show that hero work is a legitimate field of study that young supers should be allowed to pursue if they wish to. What do you think, Aizawa? Nezu asked the eraser hero whose face remained unchanged from its stoic expression. Doesn't sound like anything they can't handle. Will there be any American children with quirks involved? As of now, no. For the same reason I don't have results for the pro-hero side of the project. But if your class do a good job, the government might loosen the restraints and allow some volunteers from the homeland. That, of course, will only increase the cause's influence and improve the results. And how long would it take to get the clearance for this project? Well, given the mild nature of the project the class will be involved in, it shouldn't take too long. I have pretty good connections after all. Give it a month or so and everything should be golden. Plus, that gives you time to give your students the rundown. As long as it doesn't end with them getting shipped to Guantanamo Bay for being themselves. Whoa, there is no way in hell I'll let that happen. No anti-hero government dogs are gonna get your class detained, not while I'm here, Winston proclaimed. I was joking. Aizawa replied with his unintentionally creepy grin. Winston tugged his collar awkwardly before clearing his throat. So I'm assuming we're in agreement on this. Absolutely. You can count on our support, Mr. Deaver. Nezu smiled. And don't worry. Getting clearance for my students to visit America shouldn't be a problem on my end. Excellent. In that case, I'll keep you posted on updates and where to rendezvous with me when the time comes. See ya. Winston bid the heroes good day before hanging up. Well then, we'd better get to work, Aizawa. I'll begin on getting the students' clearance for departure while you inform them of the project. Let's call it extracurricular. Agreed. Aizawa nodded before exiting. After making another call to the Hero Public Safety Commission, Nezu then proceeded to leave the building as he went to meet with them to discuss his plan, unaware that he was being followed by a familiar short-haired man who brought a finger to an earpiece he was wearing. Sir, I think I've found something our new client will be interested in hearing. Illusion grinned. Meanwhile, Aizawa made his way to homeroom class to fill the students of 1A in on the project they'd potentially be participating in. Okay, class, listen up. There's something you need to be filled in on, he said to the young heroes in training. Over the past week, the principal has been in contact with a tycoon in America by the name of Winston Deaver. One of the CEOs of DevTech, Momo Yayurazu said astonished. My family have done business with that company a few times. Hey, yeah, I have one of their phones. Denki Kaminari mentioned showing off said device while a few other class members muttered in agreement with him, holding devices of their own. They are one of the most prestigious telecommunication companies in the world, Ida spoke. But why would Principal Nezu make contact with them, Mr. Aizawa? He then asked the teacher, who replied. Well, it turns out that Mr. Deaver is also a moderate who publicly opposes the American government's ban on heroes and quirk usage. The class were visibly surprised by this detail. He tried petitioning them to rescind the law but was rejected. TCH, I'm not surprised. Bakugou scoffed. That country is run by idiots who don't understand heroes at all. Sure, I'm glad I was born in Japan. Bakugou, you know that's not all there is to it. Shototodoroki debated. Shut up, Isahat, I know the history. They only did what they did cause they couldn't handle having more quirkless people than any other country. A bunch of jealous losers throw tantrums over a few broken buildings and they fold like a DMN house of cards. ISHTU not. Some nobody actually sued a pro for stopping him from offing himself. That's enough, Bakugou, Aizawa glared. As I was saying, after reading about Mr. Deaver's cause, the principal decided to contact him to offer his assistance. After providing him with information on all of you, Mr. Deaver came up with a plan that could possibly convince the government to reconsider the law. You mean this guy wants us to help him legalize heroes in America again? Kirishima asked with a grin. Essentially, yes. He has a plan in the works for pro-heroes in America as well, but believes covering both sides of the hero system is the most surefire way of overturning the law. If the project succeeds, it would mean a new dawn for quirk users in the USA. And we'd be a major cause behind it. Izuku murmured, bewildered by the scale of the possibility. Can you imagine how many famous American supers would be able to come out of hiding again? Supers? Ochako queried. Oh, it's what they call heroes in America. Sacker blew. We would be a leading cause in La Revolution, Yuga Aoyama proclaimed dramatically. So how exactly are we involved? Will we be assisting the police in stopping crimes? Ribbit. Tsu asked with a finger to her chin. Not exactly. You'll be setting up your own pseudo-hero agency in a small town to provide service to the citizens. Stuff like finding missing belongings, assisting the elderly, making repairs, rescuing pets, or helping children who've lost their parents, all without the involvement of the police. Are you shitting me? Bakugou roared. That's not hero work, that's community service. Kaken, even minor deeds are worth doing if it helps make others happy. Izuku rebuked. Precisely, Midoriya, Aizawa nodded. The most important duty you'll have in this project is establishing trust and appreciation with the community. By doing so, you'll not only ease the fears and doubts any quirkless citizens may have against heroes, but you'll also be showing how quirks, in general, can be more beneficial to society than detrimental. Some of you might not see this as hero work compared to what you know or have experienced, but basic tasks can lead to significant changes if done well. Our small ripples could grow into mighty waves, Fumikage Takoyami conveyed. So how long would we be working there? Kyokajiru asked. That detail is yet to be decided, Aizawa replied. Mr. Deaver and Principal Nizu are both still in the task of getting clearance for the project. I only wanted to inform you of it now so that you'd be prepared should the government allow it to be carried out. Well, I hope they say yes. I've always wanted to go to America, Mina Ashido hoped gleefully. Just don't get your hopes up too high. I don't want this distracting any of you from your studies. Speaking of which, we're having a pop quiz today, Aizawa announced, inwardly smiling at the united groans from most of the class. A month went by before Bob was contacted again by Mirage. As Helen was putting away the day's ironing, she noticed something stuck to one of her husband's dress shirts. She reached out and plucked off what appeared to be a single silvery hair. Where could it have come from? Her thoughts were interrupted, however, by the phone ringing. She went to pick up the one in their bedroom before Bob's voice sounded from his study. I got it. Don't worry, honey, I got it, he said before answering his own. Hello? We have a new assignment for you, Mirage answered. Unbeknownst to her and Bob, however, Helen pressed the receiver on the other landline, allowing her to listen in on the conversation. How soon can you get here? She heard a woman's voice on the other end, followed by her husband's. I'll leave tomorrow morning. See you there. Goodbye. Helen felt her breath hitch. Who was Bob speaking with? Was she from Unicare? What was she calling Bob in for? There was only one way to find out. Making her way to the study, she met Bob outside just as he was opening the door, taking the man by surprise. Who was that, honey? The, office? She asked innocently, to which Bob replied. Another conference. Short notice, but you know duty calls. He inched his way past her with an awkward chuckle. Something about his tone didn't sit right with Helen. It was just another conference. So why did he sound like Dash whenever he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar? She had her ways of catching him. She wandered into his study, looking about the place until she noticed his desk drawer was slightly open. Unable to fight her curiosity, she opened it and saw the lockbox he'd been setting money aside in for the kids' college funds. At least that's what she'd believed until she saw the post-it on top that read New Life. Her eyes widened slightly as her mind began spinning. What did he mean by a new life? Was the money not for what he said it was? What other purposes could he possibly have for storing it away? That mixed with her memories of the hair, the voice, and how Bob had somehow overcome his frustration since he first left bore a terrible thought. Could her husband truly be? No, he couldn't, he wouldn't. She was the only one for him, she knew this. So why couldn't she rid herself of this churning in her gut? It was still there the next morning when Helen went to see him off as he got into his car. Bob? She asked somewhat timidly. Yeah, what's up, honey? He asked back, adjusting his mirror, unable to see his wife doing her best to push down the bad thoughts she'd been having. Have a great trip. She leaned down to his level, a nervous smile on her face. Thanks, sweetie. I'll call you when I get there. I love you. So much. Helen said with utmost sincerity as Bob turned to face her and lift his shades. I love you too. He smiled and gave her an embrace before driving off. Helen did feel somewhat relieved, but the fear wasn't completely gone. Hopefully, it wouldn't turn out to be justified. Back in Japan, Izuku and friends were buzzing with excitement, as a few days ago Aizawa informed them that Nizu and Winston had managed to get the clearance they needed to carry out the project. They hadn't been given all the details yet, but that didn't bother the students as they were happy enough knowing that they would be playing a vital role in what was quite literally the chance of a lifetime. Izuku himself was making his way to the dorms to begin packing when he was stopped in the hallway by a familiar face. Young Midoriya, All Might greeted him with a smile. I heard the news from the faculty. Congratulations to you all. Thanks, All Might. I'm still getting over the shock, to be honest. Izuku grinned. I can imagine why. It's not every day students are presented with such opportunity, let alone first years. On top of everything else you and your friends have been through, you're sure to go down as the most out there band of greenhorns in the history of this school. All Might laughed. Can't argue with that. Izuku agreed before he frowned slightly. I'm not gonna lie, All Might, I'm pretty nervous about this. I mean, this isn't just some extracurricular activity. The future of all American heroes, old and young, are riding on this project, and we're carrying half of it. All Might matched his frown as he looked out the window, his hands in his pockets. Indeed, it is a lot of pressure, and for some that can be the greatest form of motivation. He turned his gaze back to Izuku. But I'm sure you realize that you're not alone in this. It carries a great weight, yes, but it's not one you need carry with just yourself. Izuku smiled understandingly. Yeah, this time it's a weight all my friends share with me. Exactly. And with them by your side, there's nothing you can't accomplish if you all set your minds to it, because if there's one thing I've learned about you kids over the year I've known you, it's that you'll never turn back no matter the struggles. It's that determination that will make each and every one of you great heroes that will surely inspire the next generation, just as I and the rest of your mentors inspired you all. Izuku smiled thankfully for his mentor's words before he was pulled into a hug by All Might, who patted his back. Good luck, Izuku. We're behind you all the way. The boy bit back his tears as he returned the hug. I'll tell the others what you told me, All Might. I'm sure a lot of them are nervous too. At least not to the point of spraying waterfalls from their eyes, right? All Might joked, earning a laugh from Izuku before the boy carried on his way, waving goodbye to the retired hero. I wonder if he'll see you and your family again, Bob. It sure would be nice for one of your old friends to reunite with you. After being flown in, Bob was welcomed back to the island by Mirage as he was taken to the main facility via a rail-mounted pod which traveled along a track through the jungle and up a secret waterfall before arriving at the guest suite. You'll be briefed on your assignment in the conference room at 2D Wing, room 113. Mirage informed him. 2 o'clock. Got it. See you there. The woman smiled as she watched Mr. Incredible enter his room before taking the pod to another location where she was greeted by Syndrome. He's settled in. Excellent, Mirage, thank you. The villain grinned. And Illusion has just reported in on his recon mission in Japan. It looks like Mickey Mouse has got the green light for those kids to help Deaver on his little clubhouse project in the States. I imagine that interests you, Shigaraki. He turned his head to the decay villain who was draped in a nearby chair with his legs crossed. Indeed. Those brats have been thorns in my side for too long. They'll be perfect for your side of our agreement. I help you kill Incredible. You help me kill them. Mirage appeared horrified at the idea, but neither Shigaraki nor Syndrome seemed to notice as the latter replied. Of course. I know how to make sure they'll be taking a little detour on their field trip. Will you be joining me in my attack on our special guest? Shigaraki shook his head. No. Incredible is your enemy, so you'll have the honor. I'll just assign a couple of my team assist you, but you get to land the finishing blow. Sweet. Then I guess it's showtime. Syndrome grinned wickedly. I know this isn't a vacation or anything, but is anyone else hoping this Deaver guy will send us to New York? Kaminari asked, shutting his suitcase as he along with the rest of Class 1A were finishing their packing. Indeed, just as Syndrome said, Winston had succeeded in getting permission from the American government to run his junior super squad, as he called it. And in turn, Nezu had got the whole class clearance to travel to the USA for the project. I'll admit I have always wanted to go there, so I'll be crossing my fingers for it. Mizo Shoji agreed, summoning several hands from his tentacles to perform the gesture multiple times. I hope it's near a beach. Then we'd have somewhere to relax after work. Toru Hagakure wished, the invisible girl bouncing on her heels excitedly. I'm more excited about the treats they've got. I hear USA candy is among the sweetest there is. Sure will be useful for my quirk. Rikido Sato grinned. Regardless of where we're going, I wonder if we'll get to meet any American pros if the project succeeds, Shoto wondered. Hey, yeah, some of the greatest heroes in the world came from America before the law was put into place, Izuku said. They say Mr. Incredible rivaled All Might back in his golden age. And then there's Frozone O, also Firenick. I wonder how their quirks would compare to yours, Todoroki. I mean, they are older than us, but they've also been out of work for 15 years supposedly without practice. What would that kind of restriction do to a hero? Could you even? The others looked at Izuku awkwardly as he went off on one of his muttering sprees, to which Ochako shook her head with a smile as she snapped her fingers in front of his face. Deku, you're doing it again. She giggled as Izuku blushed embarrassingly, rubbing the back of his head. He's right though. The USA is filled with amazing supermen. And superwomen tilde. Minoru, the class pervert, grinned lecherously. If there's any super I want to meet, it's Elastigirl. Voted #1 hottest hero in America 3 times running. So sexy tilde. He drooled over a magazine he was holding, which displayed a picture of the stretchy hero herself from back in her glory days. The class were mostly disturbed by the belonging, though some of the boys did blush at the image. How old is that thing? Mashiro Ajiro asked rhetorically. And where in Japan did you get no? No, I don't want to know. Momo shook her head while covering her ears. At that moment Aizawa entered the lounge, followed by a strapping young man with blonde hair who was holding Eri's hand. This was the third-year student, Mirio Tagata. Are you all packed? If not, you're getting left behind 'cause we're going, he said before turning his head to Mirio. Thanks again for agreeing to look after Eri while we're gone. No problem, Mr. Aizawa, it's my pleasure. Mirio grinned with a thumbs up as he looked down at Eri. Do you want to say bye to everyone before they leave, Eri? And wish them luck on their mission? He smiled as he let go of her hand so that the little girl could run up to hug Izuku. I'll miss you, Deku. She sniffled as the boy returned her hug. Hey, what's with the he waterworks? He asked softly. We'll be back before you can say candy apples. And we'll make sure to call every week to tell all we've been up to. Ochako promised. Yes, maintaining contact with friends and family is a healthy habit during long trips. Ida nodded. Speak for yourself, 4 eyes. Bakugou snarked. I for one am glad to be going away from home for a while. That way I won't have to deal with it's my old lady breathing down my neck. Outrageous. One should never speak ill of their mother, Bakugou, Ida scolded as Bakugou smirked. Did you ever stop to think she only scolds you because she cares about your well-being? You've got that right, Ida. My mom couldn't stop crying when I gave her the news. Izuku chuckled. She'll probably be expecting me to call every day. He joked. If you're all done chatting, we're leaving now. Aizawa said impatiently as he led the class out of the dorms, Eri and Mirio waving them goodbye. After boarding the school bus, they swiftly made their way to the airport where a large jet was waiting for them. Ah, you're here. The pilot greeted them from the boarding stairs. And not a moment too soon. Is everyone here and accounted for? Yes, everyone's present, Aizawa confirmed. Then we're ready for departure. If you'll all please take your seats, we can take off immediately. The pilot saluted the heroes as they boarded the plane. The man watched them pass by before making his way to the cockpit, his back hiding an evil smile. Time for takeoff? His co-pilot asked him. Yes. So let's not keep our bosses waiting, the man said as he sat down, removing his hat to reveal his short black hair. Illusion chuckled to himself as he set the plane for takeoff, while his co-pilot turned out to be none other than Kurogiri, and lying between the two villains was the lifeless body of the true pilot. Back in America, Helen was busying herself with the housework, mainly to take her mind off the thoughts she'd been having when her vacuuming eventually led her to Bob's study. After letting herself in to clean the area, she stopped to glance at her husband's old supersuit before turning back to her work. She doubled back, however, when she noticed something off about the costume. Walking over to the case, she stared closely at the suit until she gasped upon seeing a stitch on one of the sleeves. Her eyes narrowed as she recognized the patch job. Edna. It seemed the situation with Bob was getting fishier by the minute. Picking up her phone, Helen dialed the fashionista's number and waited. I'd like to speak with Edna, she said when the other end picked up. This is Edna, the woman herself answered. This is Helen. Helen who? Helen Parr? You know. She inhaled before reluctantly identifying herself. Elastigirl. Darling, Helen juggled and dropped the phone from the shock as Edna exclaimed joyfully. It's been such a long time after all these years, so long. Yes, it's been a while. Listen, there's only one person Bob would trust to patch his supersuit, and that's you. Yes. Marvelous, isn't it? Much better than those horrible pajamas he used to wear. Edna replied, who was casually swiveling in a lounge chair in front of a large fish tank. Huh? They are all finished. When are you coming to see? Much better? Helen muttered under her breath, confused. Look, I'm calling about... Don't make me beg, darling. I won't do it, you know? Edna chuckled. Beg? Helen said, puzzled, before continuing to try and get her message across. No. I'm calling about suit. About Bob's suit. I'm calling about Bob's suit, she stressed. You come in 1 hour, darling. I insist, okay? Okay. Goodbye. Edna said before hanging up, leaving Helen even more confused than she'd been before. Just what was going on? Back on the island, however, Syndrome was about to spring his trap as Bob was making his way to the meeting room for his supposed assignment briefing. Upon entering the room, he was confused to find it empty, save for a long table with rows of chairs on either side. Chalking the absence of other sup to being early, Bob sat himself down and waited, drumming his fingers on the table. He casually looked up at the clock above the doorframe to see it was now 2 o'clock. But before he had time to wonder where everyone was, the back wall of the room suddenly slid away, revealing the Omnidroid? No, this one was different. It was nearly 10 times the size of the one he'd fought, and its visor was a sinister red instead of cyan. The killer robot reached into the room and seized Mr. Incredible in its claw before tossing him out of the building and into the jungle. Strong hero landed with a thud before he heard a voice coming from the machine. It's bigger. Bob didn't have time to think as the Omnidroid snatched him up and flung him again. It's badder. The robot stomped toward him as he tried to get away. Ladies and gentlemen, it's too much for Mr. Incredible. But the Omnidroid was too quick as it grabbed once more, only this time it spun 2 of its claws and brought them in to either side of his throat, about to decapitate the hero. But just as they were millimeters away from his neck, the tentacles stopped moving, keeping the rotating blades within a hair's breadth of killing him as the source of the voice revealed himself. Whoa, it's finally ready, Syndrome cheered as he flew into the scene on a pair of rocket-powered boots and landed atop the Omnidroid's head. He pressed a couple of buttons on his right glove, causing the claws to stop spinning, while the one holding Bob lifted him closer to face the villain. You know, I went through quite a few supers to get it worthy to fight you. But man, it wasn't good enough, he said jauntily. After you trashed the last one, I had to make some major modifications. Sure, it was difficult, but you are worth it. I mean, after all, I am your biggest fan. His voice lowered to an indicative drawl as Mr. Incredible recognized the man he was at the mercy of. It was none other than Buddy, he murmured in disbelief. The name struck a nerve as Syndrome angrily pressed a few buttons. My name is not Buddy, he roared as the Omnidroid threw his captive against the ground whilst he hovered down to join him. And it's not Ellencredible either. That ship has sailed. All I wanted was to help you. I only wanted to help. And what did you say to me? Fly home, buddy. I work alone. Those words echoed in Syndrome's memory as he recalled the anger and rejection he felt after that night. How after returning to his childhood home to glare at the display of Mr. Incredible memorabilia he'd amassed over the years, as he'd angrily hurled a large framed picture of the #1 American hero away like trash. It tore me apart. But I learned an important lesson. You can't count on anyone, especially your heroes. He spat venomously at Bob, who was leaning against a rock, out of breath and in pain from the beating he'd taken. I was wrong to treat you that way. I'm sorry. He apologized, only for Syndrome to roll his eyes. See? Now you respect me, because I'm a threat. That's the way it works. Mr. Incredible, hurriedly thinking of a way out, spotted a log a few feet away from where he was standing. He began to slowly inch towards it as Syndrome continued to talk. Turns out there's a lot of people, whole countries, who want respect, and they will pay through the nose to get it. How do you think I got rich? I invented weapons. And now I have a weapon only I can defeat. And when I unleash it, I'll get... He was interrupted by Bob throwing the log at him, forcing him to duck. But before the hero could strike back, Syndrome froze him with the same glowing beam he'd used on Shigaraki. "You sly dog, you got me monologuing, I can't believe it." He laughed as he swung Mr. Incredible around a few times before slamming him against the rock. "It's cool, huh? 0-point energy. Yeah, I saved the best inventions for myself." The villain then zapped him again with the ZPE and threw him straight up before freezing him again in midair. "Am I good enough now?" he mocked the hero, throwing him back and forth like a ragdoll. "Who's super now? I'm Syndrome, your nemesis and As the villain made a grandiose gesture with his arm, he forgot to turn the ZPE off, causing him to inadvertently fling Mr. Incredible far off into the distance. "Oh, brilliant," he muttered sarcastically before speaking into a communicator. "He's flying in your direction. Don't let him escape, I'm on my way," he instructed to whoever was on the other end before taking off into the air. Bob found himself landing in a river after his flight came to an abrupt end. The strong hero gasped as he broke the surface of the rapids and fought against the current to reach the nearest rock. His mind was asunder as reality dawned on him. The entire thing had been a trap and he'd fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. And to think the one behind it all was the boy who'd once desired nothing more than to be a hero himself. The thoughts weighed so heavily on his mind that he didn't question the small hand that was reaching out to him, offering to pull him from the river. He took the outstretched appendage and, using his own strength, pulled himself up onto the rock. "Thank you for the assist," he panted before a scream tore itself from his throat as a stabbing pain pierced the top of his hand, forcing him to look up into the crazed eyes of a blonde teenage girl wearing a black mask lined with pipes over her mouth, as well as a second mask around her neck styled with a grin of sharp metal teeth. Her hand was gripping one of what appeared to several large syringes, the needle of which was sticking in the top of his hand. "You're welcome. Golly, those are some massive muscles you've got there, Mr. Not as big as Musculars, but still pretty big. Bet they need lots and lots of blood." She giggled, her voice dripping with a sincere hunger as Mr. Incredible watched in horror as his own blood began to flow into the syringe. "This," the girl drooled, her face blushing before Bob managed to snap back to his senses and threw a punch at her, sending her flying back and ripping the needle out of his hand. The wound was minuscule, but Mr. Incredible still instinctively clutched his hand, more out of fear of what this insane girl had just done to him. She laughed madly as she sat up, shrugging off whatever injury he may have caused her with a roll of her neck, sighing as her bones popped. "Wow, you punch as hard as Izuku, Mr. Though I doubt you look as good as he does all cut up," she tittered. Izuku, Bob repeated the name in his head. She couldn't possibly mean the same boy he was thinking of. But he had no time to dwell on it as the girl lunged, drawing a pair of large knives and slashing wildly at him. Mr. Incredible dodged the bladed attacks as he backed away from the river toward the jungle. But moments later the girl stopped attacking as Mr. Incredible felt another presence behind him. Boo! The hero had no time to dodge as a cloud of blue fire struck him in the back, blasting him across the ground. As he slid to a halt, Bob was surprised to find that aside from a few small burns on his face, the rest of his body was virtually unscathed. It had to be because of his suit. Could Edna have made it fireproof? He looked up from the ground to see his second attacker was a young man with black hair and covered in burn scars. He sucked his teeth in annoyance of his attack doing no damage. "Damn, I figured a blast like that would be enough to incapacitate him. Looks like I'll have to turn up the heat." He grinned wickedly as the blonde girl stepped up beside him. "Careful now, Dabai. Remember, Syndrome's the one who gets to kill him." "Then maybe you should be more careful where you stick him with those knives, Toga." Dabai answered back as Mr. Incredible picked himself up. Just how many villains were on this island? The moment was interrupted, however, by the arrival of Syndrome. Thinking fast, Bob rushed towards the edge of the river, which ended in a waterfall. Both Syndrome and Dabai took shots at him, but missed as Mr. Incredible dove off the cliff into the bade below. "Is he dead?" Toga wondered, staring down over the edge curiously. "No, it's unlikely a fall like that would kill him," Dabai doubted. "Then let's fix that, shall we?" Syndrome smirked as he pulled a small white stick with a circular end out of his right gauntlet. "Try this one on for size, big boy." He spoke darkly, pressing the tip of the strange item, causing it to flash with a beeping red light before he dropped it to the base of the waterfall. Below the surface, Bob spotted the object as it sank in front of his face. Having past experience with small, flashing beeping items, he instantly realized it was a bomb and began to swim away from it towards a tunnel in the bedrock. The second the bomb touched a rock, it detonated with an enormous explosion, sending out a blast of water so great it not only reached the top of the falls where the villains were standing, but also sent Bob flying through the tunnel and launching him into an air pocket surrounded by a small cave system. Gasping for air, the hero raised his head and leaped back in fright as he found himself face to face with a skeleton. After calming down from the shock, he slowly approached the dead remains as he noticed it was wearing a familiar visored helmet. Rubbing some grime off the top of it, he saw it was inscribed with an insignia, GB. Gazerbeam. He identified his old super friend in shock. So this is what had happened to him after he went missing. He did recall Syndrome mentioning he'd pitted the Omnidroid against several supers before targeting him. Just how many heroes had he killed? And what part did these other villains play in it all? As he lay back in the cave to recover his strength, he noticed that something was off about the stalagmites and stalactites. Their formation seemed unnatural, as though they had been cut short at certain points or angles. Looking back at Gazerbeam's skeleton, his thoughts clicked as he followed the direction of the dead super's gaze to see that a message had indeed been carved into the rocks by his quirk. Kronos, he read out the single word etched across the cave when he heard a sound approaching. Seconds later, a hovering probe emerged from the underwater tunnel as it scanned the cave and then glided over to Gazerbeam's skeleton to scan it as well before beeping and turning back towards the tunnel, completely unaware that Bob had been hiding behind the corpse the whole time. Back on the surface, Syndrome and the others patiently waited as the probe flew back up to them before slotting itself into Syndrome's left gauntlet and delivered its report. Life readings negative. Mr. Incredible terminated. With a satisfied smile, Syndrome turned about and walked away. Awawa, it's over already. I wanted to play with him some more. Toga whined. So now what? Dabai asked Syndrome. Now, I'll fulfill my end of the deal. So don't you worry, Toga. The fun's just starting, he said with an evil laugh. And right he was, as not far from the island, the plane carrying Class 1A and piloted by Illusion and Kirigiri was making its way toward the villains' headquarters. They'd been flying for about 5 hours since they left Japan, and most of the students were either sleeping, talking amongst themselves, or watching whatever was available on the built-in TVs. How much longer until we reach America? Hantashiro asked. Not for another 10 hours, I'd estimate. Ida calculated. Though it varies depending on the state we'll be traveling to. The tape hero seemed confused by this, though, as he spoke. But then, what's that? He pointed out the window. The passengers on his side of the plane looked out to see the island coming into view. An island? Are we passing Hawaii? Mina wondered. No. I've been to Hawaii, and that is definitely not it. Momo denied. Doesn't look like any island I've ever seen on a map, Aizawa said suspiciously. Now he wasn't someone who'd traveled the world, but he knew his geography. Hey, we're getting closer to it. It feels like we're going down. I thought this was a non-stop flight. Koji Koda shyly spoke in a rare instance. That didn't sit well with Aizawa. This was indeed scheduled to be a non-stop flight, so why were they beginning to land? Mr. Aizawa? Kirishima asked. All of you stay seated. I'm just going to speak with the pilot, the man said as he made his way to the front of the plane before he knocked. Is this our refueling stop? He asked calmly as Illusion's voice sounded from behind the door. Yes, sir. It shouldn't take long once we've landed. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, but he had to be certain of his suspicions. Then shouldn't the steward be serving our meal for the evening at this point? He asked expectantly. When Illusion replied, he caught an air of nervousness in his voice. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. It seems the food is a little behind schedule. Please return to your seat and we'll be with you shortly. His suspicions were confirmed. The flight had been hijacked. Pilot, there was no evening meal scheduled for this flight, he said, tugging at his combat scarf, and it was also confirmed to be non-stop. So why don't you tell me where you're taking me and my class? I don't know what you're talking about, sir. Please remain C. The man was cut short as Aizawa slammed his body into the door. Mr. Aizawa, what's going on? Ida asked. We're off course. Someone's hijacked the plane and they're taking us to that island, Aizawa informed the students. Izuku and Ochako looked at each other fearfully as the latter spoke up. Hijacked? You mean by terrorists? I don't know, but we need to regain control of the plane. Aizawa gritted his teeth as he continued to try and break the door down. At that moment, the plane swayed from side to side, causing some of the students to fall over, Aizawa trying to keep his balance. Those bastards? Do they have any idea who they're dealing with? Bakugou snarled, sparks forming in his open palm. Sir, allow me, Shoto suggested as he placed his hand on the door, causing ice to form around the hinges until with a sharp kick the door fell away and several of the students screamed when they saw the pilot's dead body lying between the villains who looked back at the group. Kirigiri, Aizawa recognized the warp villain who looked at Illusion. I believe it's time to abandon ship, he said before forming a portal which swallowed Illusion before he could speak. Don't worry, it's on autopilot, so just sit back and fasten your seat belts. It's going to be a rough landing, he said similarly to the group before disappearing himself, leaving the teacher and students alone on the plane, which was now picking up speed and heading straight for the island. What are we gonna do? Minta panicked. I don't want to die in a plane crash. I'm supposed to pass away in my sleep betwixt the bosom of my future wife. Does anyone know how to fly? Kaminari asked desperately. For once I wish Hatsune was here, Ida muttered as he saw Aizawa sit himself in the pilot's seat before pounding his fist on the dashboard angrily. Sir? The villains opened the fuel hatch. If we turn the plane back on course, we'll run out of fuel and crash before we reach mainland. But at this speed, we're going to hit the island. Ida's glasses glinted as he pushed them up before taking the co-pilot's seat. Mr. Aizawa, I may not be a pilot, but I do know engines. The best thing we can do now is slow the plane's landing. Then let's hear it, Ida. As the engine hero assisted Aizawa, Momo, being the assistant class rep, turned to face the others. Everyone, we're making an emergency landing. All of you return to your seats and buckle in. The others did as she said whilst Aizawa and Ida worked together to glide the plane towards the island. As they drew closer, Aizawa called back to the students as they were about to hit the jungle canopy. Everyone hold on. Many of the students threw fearful glances at one another, Izuku holding his hand out to Ochako who held it tightly in her own. With that the plane began to plow through the trees, tearing holes along the hull and destroying the engines as everyone gripped their seats for dear life. Eventually the plane came to grinding halt, broken and busted. Nobody made a sound until the silence was broken by the oxygen masks falling from the ceiling. Well, those were a little slow, Jiru muttered as Aizawa looked back at them. Is everyone all right? His students nodded and/or spoke back to confirm. Good. Then let's get out of here, he said as he opened the emergency exit, causing its inflatable slide to inflate before instructing the children to exit the plane, going last himself to join them. Where the hell are we? Bakugou asked as Shoto set about extinguishing any fires that had formed on the plane or surrounding area. I don't know. But I do know we aren't getting out the way we came in, Aizawa muttered, throwing a glance at the wreck. And I also know the League of Villains are behind this. Why am I not surprised? Kirishima scowled. So what do we do? Mina asked, looking at her phone. I'm not getting any reception. The others checked their phones to find they were the same. We find a means of contacting help and confirming our location, Aizawa replied as he began to walk away from the crash site. Stay close to me. The others, though still in shock from what had transpired, followed after their teacher, while on a nearby branch one of Syndrome's spy birds was watching them. How's that for a haul? The villain himself said from the monitor room as he turned to Shigaraki, who chuckled back. It seems I was right to ally with you, Syndrome. This is going to be very fun indeed. Having narrowly avoided dying in a fiery plane crash, Class 1 now found themselves stranded on an uncharted island that for all they knew was under the control of the League of Villains. Fortunately for the heroes, the cargo hold hadn't been torn open during the crash, and so they were able to retrieve and don their super suits. They were probably going to be needing them for the challenges they were sure to come. So, Mr. Aizawa? Kirishima inquired. If we're going to escape this island, how are we supposed to do it, considering we don't know jack about this place? the Eraser hero replied, when in enemy territory your best way out begins with gathering intel. However, since the villains know we're here, reconnaissance won't be easy. The worst case scenario being that they're watching us right now. His students frantically looked about in response. So what you're saying is we find out what we want to know by beating it out of them when they come for us. Bakugou summarized, pounding his fist, to which Aizawa nodded grimly. It's very likely we'll be fighting our way out of this, yes, but in the event that any of us are separated or captured, we'll need a hideout in order to regroup and come up with a plan. So it's imperative that we stay connected. I'm on it, sir, Momo spoke up as she began to spawn a bunch of earphone communicators. Everyone take an earpiece. We'll be able to stay in contact using these. I can only establish one line of communication for every 3 devices, so I've color-coded them for groups of 3. Mr. Aizawa and Ida, mine's paired up with yours. Everyone else divide into groups. Excellent work, Yaoyorozu, Aizawa commended, taking his own item as everyone put them on. The communicators were sorted out as follows. Aizawa, Tenya, and Momo. Izuku, Ochako, and Tsu. Bakugou, Kirishima, and Kaminari. Mina, Jiro, and Toru. Shoji, Mainta, and Takoyami. Todoroki, Koda, and Ajiro. Aoyama, Shiro, and Sato. Aizawa tested the buttons on his earpiece to check his contacts with Tenya and Momo before addressing the class, and just so you know, if you must fight, do it to defend either yourselves or each other, but don't go looking for the enemy. You really think the League of Villains are behind this though, Mr. Aizawa? Izuku asked. I know we all saw Kurogiri on the plane, but who was that other man? Maybe they've teamed up with another villain like how they did with Overhaul, Tsu assumed. It is a possibility, Aizawa agreed. So even though we're familiar with the League, be prepared for unknown enemies. Yes, sir. The students nodded as they continued wandering through the jungle, passing by a familiar-looking waterfall. As they did, Takoyami's eyes caught sight of bubbles appearing on the surface and a shadow moving beneath them. Stop, he whispered to the group before pointing. They quickly hid in the foliage before a large man in a red suit and black eye mask broke through the water, gasping heavily. He swam to the shore and pulled himself out, looking back up at the waterfall as though he expected someone to be there. He sighed heavily and turned back only to be yanked to the ground when he found his torso wrapped in a scarf-like binding. Start talking. He looked up into the glaring red eyes of Aizawa, his long black hair standing on end. Tell me who you work for and how to get off this island. The man's first instinct was to break out of his bonds, but to his surprise he found he couldn't. In fact, it felt like his strength had vanished completely. Answer me, Aizawa repeated. Who are you? That's what I want to know. Are you with the League of Villains or their accomplices? Neither. I'm a hero. Are you? Mr. Aizawa, wait! Izuku emerged from his hiding spot along with the rest of the class as the boy looked at the hero's costume. That symbol ... it can't be. His eyes popped behind his mask as he recognized the man. You're Mr. Incredible. The former American #1, Ochako said in disbelief. Glad to know someone recognizes me. Mr. Incredible muttered as Aizawa reluctantly released him and pulled him to his feet, having now had a chance to verify Izuku's claim. You're right, that's definitely his symbol. Got a wardrobe change, though, it would seem. Well, now that you know who I am, tell me who you are, Mr. Incredible asked, but as he looked at the group he started to realize the situation. Wait, how long have you been here? We just got here. Our flight was hijacked by villains and brought to this island. One of the culprits we happen to know of. Aizawa answered as he blinked, causing his hair to fall back down, and Mr. Incredible felt his strength returning. Syndrome brought you here too? He asked. Syndrome? Who's that? Jiro questioned. The League of the Villains are the ones who brought us here. Tenya gripped his chin as he shifted his glasses. I think we may have identified the head of their accomplices. The League of Villains, Mr. Incredible muttered. I've never heard of them, but I think I was attacked by 2 of them not long ago. A burnt man with blue flames and a blonde girl with knives. Toga and Dabai. Aizawa identified them as he approached Mr. Incredible. It seems we've both been dragged into whatever these villains are up to. I'm Shota Aizawa of UA, Aka Eraserhead. The Japanese hero school? Yes, the League of Villains is a high-class criminal organization in Japan. And whoever this syndrome is you speak of, it's clear that the head of the League, Tomura Shigaraki, has formed a partnership with him. But for what reason, I don't know. Mr. Incredible looked over the group, shocked to see how young they all were, save for Aizawa. I can't believe he was going to use it on a bunch of kids. The man has got to be completely insane. Aizawa raised his eyebrows. You know what's going on here? Syndrome's created a super weapon. A battle robot he calls the Omnidroid, designed to kill heroes by studying their abilities. The UA heroes gasped collectively at the revelation. Could that mean Shigaraki wants him to build him one to use against Japan? Shoto assumed concernedly. I don't know, but I have a lead. I found a strange word in an underwater cave after I escaped the villains. What was the word? Kaminari asked. Chronos. What does that mean? Mina asked curiously. I believe it's the name of the Greek titan, Chronos. Tenya answered brightly. The father of the gods Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, and best known for eating his own children alive to prevent a prophecy of being defeated by them. Several of his peers shuddered at the description as Mr. Incredible spoke. Regardless of what it means, a hero I once knew died making sure others would know what he learned, so it must be important to the villains. I need to find out what it is they're planning before more heroes like him end up dead. We may even find a way off the island in the process. Then it would be best for us to work together. Aizawa suggested, extending his hand for Mr. Incredible to shake, which he did. As the strong hero released his grip, he noticed Izuku staring at him curiously, his eyes squinting behind his mask. You okay, kid? He asked. Yeah, it's just, you seem familiar. We haven't met by any chance, have we? Izuku wondered, getting some odd looks from his peers as Bakugou laughed. What are you talking about, Deku? You met the #1 American hero. Don't gimme that crap. Yeah, you're probably right now that I think about it. Izuku chuckled awkwardly, though Mr. Incredible couldn't help feeling a slight hint of déjà vu as well. The rabbit-like mask, respirator, and nickname made it impossible for him to recognize the boy, however. There's no time to talk now. Let's keep moving, Aizawa instructed. Probably best if you follow me. I know where their base of operations is and where they keep their aircraft, Mr. Incredible suggested. Lead the way then. So, what's hero work like in Japan? The American hero asked as he led Class 1 through the jungle, the group of heroes keeping their eyes peeled for any sign of the enemy. Aizawa shrugged his shoulders at the question. Depends on what you're looking for. Underground work, teaching, rescue, raiding, healing. Pick your poison. And if none of that takes your fancy, you can always use your quirk for other outlets, Kirishima spoke. Some work at businesses with their powers, or even start their own. Dojos are pretty popular. I bet Gunhead could give you a job at his, Ochako suggested, following up Kirishima's sentence. And I take it you kids are getting a good education? Mr. Incredible assumed, to which Momo replied enthusiastically. Oh, yes, absolutely. UA truly lives up to its ranking as the most established school of heroics. There are many other institutions, though, if you aren't fortunate enough to enroll. If you don't mind being overshadowed, that is. Bakugou chuckled. The other schools are always gunning for us at the licensing exams because of it. The sad thing is he's not exactly wrong, Tenya said regrettably. All the while Bob thought to himself as he mulled over everything Aizawa and the students had said. Setting aside the fact his freelance work had been a trap all along, he'd still made a fair amount of money off it. Adding it to what he'd saved up already, he was very close to affording his dream. And with such a glowing review from some of the residents, it only added to the faith in his plan. Just a little further to go, and it would all have been worth the struggle. Of course, this required getting off the island alive first and foremost. Alone, it wouldn't have been too difficult if he kept a low profile, the villains believing him to be dead, considering. But with the sudden arrival of this class of heroes, that did unfortunately complicate things. The sudden loud whirring of a rotor cut through the air as the group looked up. Get down, Mr. Incredible hissed as they ducked into the bushes whilst two strange hovercrafts flew over the canopy. They looked like flying saucers with helicopter blades roasting around their edges to keep them aloft, each vehicle piloted by a guard. They glided over the area and out of sight of the heroes until said individuals emerged. Shoto looked off in the direction they were flying. They're heading for the crash site. Which can only mean they don't know our current location or that we're all alive, Aizawa reckoned. Mineta wiped some sweat from his brow. Well, that's a little good news. At least we know they aren't watching us right now. But they will be looking for you all when they find an empty plane crash with no bodies. Mr. Incredible quickly dashed the boy's hope as he addressed Aizawa. I hate to say this, but if we want to get everyone here off this island alive, we can't stay in a group this large if we want to stay hidden. Aizawa closed his eyes after glancing at his students, with grim realization. You're right. Though I didn't want it to have to come to this, we're going to have to split up. The man turned back to his students. Listen up. We're going to be dividing into 2 groups. Half of you will stay with me and the other half will assist Mr. Incredible in reaching the enemy's base. Midoriya, Bakugou, Uraraka, Ida, Shoji, Aoyama, Koda, Ashido, Kirishima and Sato. You're with me. Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, Asui, Kaminari, Hagakure, Shiro, Mineta, Ajiro, Tokoyami and Jiro. You'll assist Mr. Incredible in his infiltration. The students looked amongst themselves as Aizawa continued his plan. We'll go on ahead and scout the area so we can set up a hideout. Once your group has the information related to that code word, you'll rendezvous with us at our location. Thanks to Yaoyorozu's trackers, you'll know where to find us. Oh, that reminds me, Creati piped up as she handed Mr. Incredible replicas of the gear she'd made her peers. Take these. Sir, you'll be able to communicate with us. Thank you. The strong hero replied as he put them on. But what about escaping the island? Kaminari asked as Mr. Incredible thought. I don't know if any of you can pilot an aircraft, but it wouldn't matter since the one I arrived in has an automatic pilot. Maybe if we captured one of the guards we could force him to tell us how to operate it. Shinso sure could have helped us with that, Izuku thought to himself. Then that's what we'll do after you've regrouped with us. I won't sugarcoat this. Kids, we're in real trouble here. Aizawa looked at his class, somehow more serious than he usually was. But if we keep our wits about us and focus on working together to keep each other safe, we'll make it out. I just have one rule I want you to follow at all costs. Don't die or you're expelled. He concluded with a grin, though his dark joke didn't humor all his students. It'll be kinda hard for you two if we do die. Mineta snapped, though everyone ignored him as the group split in 2. One carrying on after Mr. Incredible and other heading in another direction, the operation underway. Well, darling, what do you think? Shocked would be the first word that came to Helen's mind, though it didn't even begin to describe her feelings of what she'd seen. After following up on Edna's invitation, despite the odd details the fashionista mentioned during the phone call, she had expected to get a clear-cut answer on why Bob had gone to her to get a patch job. What she hadn't expected was to learn that Edna to have not only crafted a new and improved supersuit for her husband, but her entire family. Even Jack had been given one. All of the suits were red in color and bore the same symbol styled after Bob's insignia. Not only that, but they'd been outfitted with features more suited for frontline pro heroes. Bulletproof, explosion-proof, withstanding 1000C, built-in homing devices and the newest feature, machine washable. They'd even been specified to match their quirks with her own being as stretchable as she was. Dash's being highly durable to friction to account for his speed, and Edna had even crafted a brand new material that could turn invisible in time with Violet's quirk, which according to the fashionista was quite strenuous on her own power with the amount of fiber she had to go through to perfect it. Needless to say, Helen had several questions on the situation. She had no doubts at this point. Even if Bob was at a conference, there was another business he was involved in, and it didn't involve insurance. What do I think? Bob is retired, I'm retired, our family is underground. You helped my husband resume secret hero work behind my back. Well, I assumed you knew it, darling, Edna said, somewhat as shocked as her friend was, though considering how Bob behaved during his visit, it wasn't too far out for her to suspect there'd been more than he was letting on. But then, why would he keep secrets from you? She asked, turning back in her chair. He wouldn't. Didn't. Ugh, doesn't. Helen insisted, which only stoked Edna's own suspicions further. Men at Robert's age are often unstable, prone to weakness. What? What are you saying? Do you know where he is? Of course. Do you know where he is? Edna faced Helen as she asked again, the former super now feeling more worried than ever. What do you mean? The plane's empty. Syndrome paced back and forth as he shouted into his communicator, to which the receiving guard replied. They all survived the crash landing, sir, and so far none of our cameras have spotted them. I told you they'd be tougher than you thought, Shigaraki said from across the room with his head in his hand. Syndrome eyed him for a moment before addressing his henchman. Deploy the advanced troopers and retrieval unit. Capture them if you can, but if they prove too resistant, kill them. Yes, sir. Why alive? Dabai asked. I want a chance to study their quirks. They could be useful for advancing my droid's capabilities for future attacks. Then I'll kill them. Japan's heroes would indeed be more trouble for your creation than washed-up American supers, Kirigiri stated. Should make for better sport as well. Indeed. Shigaraki agreed, turning to his right-hand villain. Bring Mr. Compress. Have him assist Syndrome's men in the capture along with Dabai and Toga. Of course. The warp villain bowed as he vanished. Oh, you mean I can go play with Izuku and Ochako? Toga giggled gleefully. They're yours to deal with. Shigaraki approved, the girl cheering as she skipped out of the room with Dabai trudging after. Will you not be going with them? Syndrome inquired. I like to let my underlings have their fun, but you're more than welcome to go if you wish. Maybe later. For now, let's discuss future prospects. Very nice. With Aizawa's team, the heroes continued to scout the island for any site they could put to use as a rendezvous out. The sun was beginning to set, casting the island in a deep orange glow which would soon turn to dark. But as the group passed through a clearing, a spotlight suddenly illuminated the group, stopping them dead in their tracks as a battalion of guards emerged from the foliage in front of the heroes, a couple of hovercrafts floating above shining their lights down on them. A number of the guards were wielding guns, while several more were taller and more muscular, wearing large black and white gauntlets, and at the front of the group one guard was wearing a different outfit compared to the other gunmen. It was a sleek red and black suit of armor with, and whilst the other guards all wore visors, his headgear consisted of a white helmet with a circular black screen covering the front. Welcome, heroes of Japan. A modified voice buzzed from the leader's helmet, the man loading his gun with a sinister click. Damn, looks like they were lying in wait for us. Aizawa cursed as he and his students readied themselves for battle. Surrender or die, super scum. One of the larger guards spoke as bolts of blue lightning began to crackle between his fingers. Guess that means negotiations off the table, Kirishima muttered. It was never on it. Bakugou snarled as his own hands crackled with brewing explosions. What's the best course of action, Mr. Aizawa? Tenya inquired. The eraser hero scanned the number of enemies, the wheels in his head turning before he responded. If we want to get away without being tracked, we'll need to take out most, if not all of them. I'll disable the big one's quirks, leaving Midoriya, Bakugou, Ida, and Sato to finish them off. Yes, sir. Izuku nodded along with the other three. Uraraka, Aoyama, Ishido, focus on taking out the hovercrafts, and Kirishima, I'm leaving the gunmen up to you. The students acknowledged his orders. Shoji and Koda, you're our best scouts, and we can't afford letting you get killed or captured, so we need you to hang back until we've cleared out the enemy. Only fight to defend yourselves. Got it. Shoji replied whilst Koda nodded silently. Aizawa focused on the brawlers as he activated his quirk. Now, on his command, Izuku, Bakugou, Tenya, and Sato charged forward. The armed guards opened fire on the group, though the four heroes leapt into the air to avoid the shots before aiming their own attacks towards the brawlers. Die! Bakugou roared as he launched an explosion at the battalion, which sent several of the gunmen flying, though when the smoke cleared the brawlers appeared unscathed, though their armor showed signs of damage. One of them thrust his large hand out to grab Bakugou by the leg in midair before sending a blast of electricity through the teen's body. Gog! The explosion hero yelled in pain as the guard swung him down against the ground. The brawler raised his large fist to strike again before he was kicked in the jaw by Izuku, knocking him to the ground. What? Aizawa blinked in shock, deactivating his quirk in the process. No, I had them in my sights. His quirk should have been neutralized. Surprised? The lead guard spoke. Shigaraki told the boss all about you, Eraserhead. Of all the heroes who could have ended up here, you're undoubtedly the unluckiest of them all. What's he talking about? Kirishima, who was helping Bakugou to his feet, while simultaneously deflecting bullets, questioned. Izuku backflipped away from the brawler he was fighting as the man's gauntlet transformed into a large flamethrower, spraying a torrent of fire at him. As the boy looked over the enemy soldiers, he started to realize what the leader had implied. The brawlers were changing the style of their weapons, but not in a way akin to any transformation quirk, and the smaller guards were all using handheld firearms. What's more, their fighting was similar to that of a military or police squad, nothing like the villains they'd faced in the past. With all those factors together, it could only imply. They're quirkless, he shouted in realization. They all are. None of these people have quirks. All of them? Tenya said in disbelief as the brawlers he was up against shot several hooked cables out of the chest plate of his armor to try and ensnare him, confirming Izuku's statement. Smart thinking, kid. No, we don't have quirks, but we do have power. The lead guard tossed his regular firearm aside before pulling out a couple of tonfa-like weapons, which then extended and became engulfed with electricity. Let's see how you fare in a fight now, Eraserhead. He laughed maniacally as he charged the underground hero, only to be blindsided by an attack from Bakugou, who looked even angrier than before. There is no way in hell I'm letting a bunch of fucking quirkless dickbags get the drop on me. The helmeted man picked himself up as he began to trade blows with the hero, either dodging or countering each other's strikes. Aizawa decided to instead assist Ochako, Aoyama, and Mina, who were trying to bring down the hovercrafts. The vehicles were firing bullets at the three of them, Mina trying to continuously melt the ammunition with waves of acid, but it was starting to look like she was running out of juice from the strained grunts and whimpers Aizawa was picking up from her. "Uraraka," he shouted to Ochako, who was using a boulder she'd lightened to shield herself and Aoyama, as he pointed at the vehicle that was firing on them while unraveling his capture scarf. Ochako nodded before hurling the boulder at the hovercraft, forcing it to cease fire to dodge the attack, and in that window the girl flew up towards the craft in order to slap it, canceling its gravity as Aizawa lassoed his scarf around the vehicle. With a roar, the man swung the flying saucer in circles before bringing it downwards towards the other craft. Ochako put her fingers together and shouted, "Release!" just before the tangled hovercraft smashed full force into the other one, causing them both to explode on impact, the flaming wrecks crashing to the ground. "Booyah!" Kirishima cheered, punching the air at the spectacle. "You jerks are gonna have to try harder than this to take us down." The leader dodged another of Bakugou's attacks, kicking the young hero in the gut. "You're right, boy. I think we need to get serious. Troops, carpet bombing formation." The remaining smaller guards nodded to the man before launching themselves into the air on rocket boots and switching their guns to large bazookas. One of them fired at Izuku, who narrowly dodged a large gob of white, slimy substance that hit the ground with a splat. Another shot came at Tenya, who attempted to kick it back at his opponent, only for the slimy cannonball to stick to his leg. "What?" He tried to pull it off, his hand sticking to the ball in the process as he ripped it away. "What is this stuff?" He had to run as more of the guards opened fire on him, and the others with their new ammo. Meanwhile, the brawler guards had altered their gauntlets again. This time they sported large claws, similar to that of the Omnidroid. One of them, aiming at Ochako, shot out their weapon on a long metal tentacle, attempting to grab her. "Watch out!" Sato leaped to grab the tentacle before it could reach Ochako. He wrestled with the metal appendage before he managed to pull it towards himself, dragging the guard with him to deliver a solid blow to his face, knocking the grunt out cold. "Just how much equipment do these people have?" Ochako questioned, a slime ball whizzing past her head. "They've got more gadgets than Hatsune. Clearly these ruffians have tangoed with heroes many times to have this many countermeasures," Aoyama estimated, firing a laser at the airborne guards, shooting a couple out of the sky while the others managed to dodge his attack. "Then it looks like we're gonna have to bring out the big guns as well." Kirishima grinned, as he hardened his body into a ferocious, jagged form. "Red Riot, unbreakable," he roared before he charged the brawler guards. They fired on him with bullets, only for them to bounce off his skin as though they were rubber, before resorting to their tentacles. One nearly grabbed him before he cleaved the claw in two with a swing of his diamond-edged hand until he reached the brawler and reeled his fist back. Red Gauntlet. Kirishima buried his fist in the man's gut, shattering his armor and sending him flying into another brawler behind him. Both guards shooting across the clearing and hitting a cliff side which cracked upon impact. Damn it, that one's a nuisance. Capture him. The leader ordered his bomber guards to attack Kirishima with their sticky bullets, a flurry of the slime balls hailing down on the hero, only for a shower of acid to dissolve them as Mina threw herself in front of him. Thanks for the save. He grinned as Mina high-fived him with one of her own. Sometimes even shields need their backs watched. Meanwhile, Bakugou was still engaged with the leader guard who was still holding his own against the explosion hero, despite his relentless onslaught of explosions, using his electric tonfas to throw off the direction of his attacks. Just die already, you freak, the teen yelled, his frustration growing. I was just thinking the same thing, the leader replied as he went in for an overhead swing before his wrist was suddenly stopped by Aizawa's scarf, giving Bakugou the opening he needed. Eat this, he roared, sending a blast directly at the leader's face. The explosion sent the man hurtling back before he hit the ground, his helmet bouncing away after being dislodged by the blast. Ha, down in one hit, just as I'd expect from a quirkless. But Bakugou's victory was short-lived as the leader slowly got to his feet, the others looking at his face as the smoke cleared. The guy from the plane, Izuku pointed. Yes, it was none other than Illusion, who wiped a trickle of blood from his nose and glared at Bakugou. Is that the best you can do? You should know better than to underestimate your opponents. Illusion snarled, picking up his weapons as the electricity surrounding them turned from blue to red, the voltage fiercer than before. It's heroes like you I hate the most. Do you get some sick kick from looking down us? Well, it'll be the last mistake you ever make, the man shouted as he ran at Bakugou, who prepared to counterattack. But before he could strike, Illusion flipped over Bakugou, dodging the explosion he shot at him, before striking him from behind with his weapons. And he didn't let up, continuing to strike the young hero with his tonfas, leaving no room for openings. Kaken's in trouble, Izuku shouted as he looked to Ochako, who was finishing off the last brawler guard by hurling his weightless body over the canopy. Yororaka, I need you to throw me at the guy fighting Kaken. Ochako didn't know what Izuku was planning to do, but she knew he had a plan. Right, just be careful, Deku, she said as she cancelled his gravity before grabbing him by the shoulder and throwing him towards the other two, Izuku activating his full cowling. He flew towards Illusion, who was now standing over Bakugou, Aizawa unable to reach him, having found himself stuck fighting the bombers. It doesn't matter how strong your quirk is. It's wasted if it's wielded by a short-tempered little brat. You're out of your league here, boy. Should have stayed home with your parents, Illusion spat, pressing his feet down on Bakugou's arms, as a long blade emerged from the ends of his tonfas. Now it's my turn to say die. He raised his weapons as Izuku reached him. Now, he signaled. Release, Ochako returned his gravity as Izuku aimed a kick at Illusion, who barely had time to turn his head. Shoot style, Izuku kicked Illusion in the head, knocking him off Bakugou and rolling away. Are you okay, Kaken? He turned to his rival, who shouted back at him. I didn't need your help, Deku. I would have gotten myself out of it. I'll take that as a yes then. Illusion shook his head as he looked at the battle. He gritted his teeth as he saw his troops were now far fewer in numbers, and despite their growing exhaustion, the heroes were starting to have the upper hand. Shit. They may be kids, but they're skilled. We've gotten too used to fighting rusty Americans, he thought as he spoke into a communicator on his wrist. All right, you can step in. Step in? They have reinforcements on standby? Aizawa realized as a familiar black portal opened up before Toga and Dabai stepped out. Finally, I was getting bored, the latter muttered. Tenya jumped back to avoid a burst of blue flames from the scarred man. The League of Villains. Izuku Tilda, Toga cried joyfully as she ran at Izuku waving her knives. Did you miss me? Admit it, you missed me. Izuku yelped with fright as the knives nearly grazed his skin, forcing him to back away as Toga continued to try and cut him before she was smacked in the face with a tree, held by an angry Ochako who stepped up beside her best friend. Don't even think about touching him, you psycho, she hissed. Ochako Tilda, I missed you too. I never got the chance to say hi back at the Yakuza's place. Let's all three of us have a group hug, Toga grinned, skipping back towards Ochako and Izuku, flinging her syringes at them as she went. All the while, Aizawa looked at the battle as he began to take notice of his students. They were beginning to grow tired, their quirks wearing out, and with the sudden arrival of the league members, it was only getting worse. He also noticed Dabai's fire was starting to surround the area, rather like it did at the summer camp. He was trying to fence them in. Those flames are closing in, and we don't have Todoroki. If they surround us completely, none of us will get away, and they can still call in more reinforcements to finish us off. We can't hold out on this one. Knowing what he had to do, Aizawa aimed his gaze at Dabai and Toga, canceling their quirks before sending his capture scarf at the latter, tying her up as she was still distracted by Izuku and Ochako. Hey, I was busy here. Dry eyes, she whined, fiddling for her knife to cut herself loose. Everyone, head for the clearing before the fire surrounds it, Aizawa shouted at the students who began to run. You're not going anywhere, Illusion shouted, trying to go after them before his foot stopped suddenly, which he soon realized was stuck to one of the slime balls. He looked to see Kirishima and Sato pulling up chunks of the ground the balls were stuck to before hurling them at him, sticking them to his legs and arms, immobilizing him. Try getting unstuck from that, chump, Kirishima laughed, fist-bumping Sato as they made it out along with the rest of the class. Izuku stopped at the clearing before looking back at his teacher, who was holding off the remaining guards along with Dabai. Mr. Aizawa. Run! I won't allow any of you to be taken, not again, Aizawa shouted as he struck down another guard. Izuku gritted his teeth, his inner hero telling him to charge in and help his teacher. Damn it, Deku, come on, Bakugou shouted back to him. You can't save anyone if you're dead, so live to fight again. Aizawa lectured as Izuku, regretfully, turned roundabout and followed after his friends, but not before shouting, "We'll come back for you." I know you will, problem child, Aizawa murmured, restraining several guards who tried to chase after Deku. I'll die before I let any of you harm my students. But before he could continue to fight, a flash of blue light suddenly engulfed him before a small marble landed in the spot where he'd been standing. That could certainly be arranged, said Mr. Compress as he strolled onto the scene to pluck up the trapped Aizawa, rolling the marble between his finger and thumb amusingly. But our new accomplice desires to examine your capabilities before he disposes of you, so you just sit tight until then. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Yellow Pikmin 88 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.